Welcome back to another Porsche car whisperer video. If this is your first time checking out my channel, my name is Mason Gilchrist and I cover everything Porsche. And today I'm in my hometown of Seattle, Washington, and I'm going to be bringing you guys my very first Porsche, which is a 2007 Cayman S. I'm going to be going over what are some of the quirks of this model and what you should expect when you guys are in the market for this particular car. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so let's go and start off with a brief history. Where does the name Cayman come from? Well, it's actually a South American alligator, but it's spelled C-A-I-M-A-N. And it is a very nimble yet aggressive alligator, just like the Cayman is. So that's where Porsche derived the name from. Now, Porsche is no stranger of mid-engine sports cars as the Cayman is. Back in 1953, Porsche released the 550 Spider, my favorite classic Porsche of all time. And then again, in the late 60s, we released the 914. And then in the early 70s, we had the 914-6, which is a flat six motor, which Porsche is very famous for. And then we also released the 986 Boxster back in the mid to late 90s. Now, I did a quick review as well as a quirks video on that car as well. If you guys want to check that out, the link will be right up here above. This car was released at the 2005 Frankfurt Auto Show, and in 2006 was named the World Performance Car of the Year. So this car has some pretty significant accolades that come along with it. Now, initially Porsche released only the Cayman S model, and then in 2007 we released the base Cayman. So this 987.1 is what it's coined at from Porsche, was from 2006 up to 2008, and then we had another refresh in 2009, but that's going to be for a later time. The Cayman S comes with a 3.4 liter, 295 horsepower motor. That base model comes with a 2.7, 245 horsepower. So it's pretty significantly down on power as well as overall displacement. If you guys are in the market for one of these cars, I'd highly recommend going with the S model. So I think you'll find that the base model is a little bit underpowered. But what is the quickest way that you can tell if it's an S model or if it's a base model? Just by looking at the outside. Well, the quickest way, as you can tell, is by the brakes. Brakes are a little bit larger. We also have these red calipers in both the front and the rear. If you're looking at the back of the car, you'll notice that the S models have a dual exhaust, where the base models have just a single exhaust there in the back. Now, if you're in the inside, the gauges are going to be in a white on the S models, and if you have a manual Cayman, it's going to be a 6-speed if it's an S, and it will be a 5-speed if it's a base model. Let's go ahead and hop to the front, and I'll start talking about some of the quirks that you guys should look for when you guys are in the market for a 987 Cayman. Okay, so let's go ahead and start here on the front and just what are some of those small little quirks that you may find or issues with these Caymans. Well, you can see here that these front radiators, they're very low like most Porsches, and they are very susceptible to small rocks just coming right through and puncturing them. So something to definitely look out for to make sure there's no leaks coming from those, as that can be a pretty costly repair. The front bumper has to come off, and then of course those have to be replaced, and the cooling system then has to be bled. So another just quick one here is on this front hood. As soon as you open it up, these lid struts can also go bad. So as soon as you pop that open, it won't spring open like this one just did. They'll just fall and it will drop. That's a pretty quick and easy repair, as all you have to do is just replace these struts. Just takes just a couple minutes. Some of the things that I found on these cars as they're starting to get older is that a lot of these cars now can almost be about 15 years old, which is pretty crazy how time flies. But these can also become very, very yellowed over time, just like the 986, very, very similar. Make sure that these are clear, as again, you might have a foggy looking front lamp. It just doesn't look near as good. So let's go and hop to the back, as that's where a lot of the issues you may find with these cars are going to be found. A lot of the mechanical issues that are coming from the motor. So I'll see you guys in the back. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk just a little bit about the motor here on the 987 and what are some of the mechanical issues that you may find. First thing is going to be the water pump. Over time, they may start to make some noise or they'll start to leak. I would say probably every 30 to 40,000 miles, this is probably going to be something that you should just expect as part of a normal maintenance item here on the Cayman S. Pricing is going to completely range, maybe from $1,500, $2,000, maybe somewhere in there, but just go ahead and budget for that as your car starts to get a little bit older and as you drive the car just a little bit more. Something else is going to be the IMS bearing. Now, this has been beat to death on all the forums and a lot of YouTube videos, so I'm not going to really discuss that, but go ahead and do your own research on the IMS bearing. Just something that you should look out for. Again, not very many of these cars have been affected by the IMS bearing. It's probably only 5% of them have been affected when it comes to the 987. More 986 cars have been affected than 987. Going hand in hand with that is going to be the RMS, or rear main seal. Over time, as the car gets old and the rubber starts to deteriorate, the seal between the transmission and the motor is going to just start to crack, and oil is going to start to leak. Just something that happens over time. Something else that kind of goes hand in hand with oil leaks is going to be something that we call spark plug tubes. So those will start to leak over time as well, and you'll start to get some oil into the tube where the spark plug sits. That will start to cause oil to get on the spark plugs, and the car will start to run terribly, may start to misfire, and you'll notice that by a check engine light there on your instrument cluster. I've also seen coils go on these cars, so the coil pack just starts to, the rubber starts to crack, just like the seals we talked about a moment ago, or the head of the coil will also start to crack, as that's made out of plastic and it's high heat down there. The exhaust, the motor gets really, really hot down there by the engine. So definitely be on the lookout for cracked coils when you're inspecting these cars, as well, of course, as those spark plugs. Now, we're also going to see something called a MAF, or mass airflow sensor. You'll notice that the car isn't getting the optimal amount of air as that's starting to go bad. You'll notice maybe by a check engine light that pops up there on the cluster that maybe that's something that could be causing that check engine light. Now, very similar to the 986, we have the oil as well as the coolant here in the trunk of the car. There's also going to be something called the air oil separator that I talked about in that 986 video almost over a year ago. You'll notice that the air oil separator is starting to go bad when you start up the car and there's a big puff of smoke, especially in the morning. It may also make just a little bit of noise as well. And if it's making a loud squealing noise, you can take off the cap and that will make the squealing noise go away. Most likely you have an air oil separator that is starting to go bad, and the oil may even be starting to go in the intake. You don't want the oil to go where the air is supposed to go. That is no bueno. We also have the coolant cap here in the back. Coolant caps have been known to crack. Of course, they're plastic as they get older, and as well as a coolant reservoir or coolant tank. Those are made out of plastic as well, and of course, as it ages, those have been known to crack as well. Now, kind of a big one here that people talk about a lot on those forums, Renlist and whatnot, is cylinder scoring. It's only the 987S models that are prone to this issue. You'll notice it by smoke coming out the back, which could of course be an air oil separator, or possibly your cylinder scoring on the car. Maybe an abnormal ticking, or a overconsumption of oil. All of a sudden your car is just consuming a bunch of oil. Those are all signs of cylinder scoring. The quickest and easiest way to tell if you have cylinder scoring is to just do a scope down into the motor, and you'll see the scoring there on the cylinder wall. That is not good. Pretty much going to need a complete engine rebuild. So definitely be on the lookout for that as you're in the market for a 987. So also kind of what goes hand in hand of some of these mechanical quirks here with the engine is also going to be maintenance. Now, Porsche says that you should be able to maintenance these cars every 2 years or 20,000. This is one of the times that I'm going to kind of go against Porsche. I'm all for Porsche, as you guys know, and following the rule book to the T. But that to me just seems like a long interval, 2 years or 20,000 miles, especially with some of these oil consumption issues or oil leaking issues. I like to have clean oil running through my engine. I would highly recommend to do an oil change every 1 year, or maybe even less than 10,000 miles. I like to do it every couple, maybe 5,000 miles on these cars, just so you're getting clean oil going through the engine. And then of course, also doing brake fluid. Now that's gonna be every 2 years as well. Spark plugs on these cars are gonna be every 40,000 miles or 6 years. Drive belt's gonna be every 60,000 miles or so, unless it starts to crack, or unless you do that water pump. If you decide you're doing the water pump, do the belt. It's gonna save you a lot down the road. And also have them check the pulleys while they're at it as well. The pulleys that the drive belt goes around have been known to make a decent amount of noise as well. So just check out all that stuff. Make sure that the car has an ample amount of service history, and of course you get what we call a PPI. You don't see too many of these 987s coming through the Porsche dealers too much anymore, so I would highly recommend taking it to either a Porsche dealer or your local independent Porsche shop that you trust, and have them just kind of go through the car, make sure it's a sound car, as some of these of course have been tracked and they may be having some of these issues. Could be a reason that some people are getting rid of the cars. So just look out for that when you're purchasing the car. Now, that's kind of enough about talking about the engine. Let's go ahead and hop to the inside and talk about some of the other issues that we may find from the inside of the car. Okay, so now that we're on the inside, let's go over some of the issues you may find. One of those that comes right off the top of my head, because I just had this issue with this car, is the headliner. Over time, the headliner may start to droop, but that's usually for cars that tend to sit outside a little bit more than in a climate-controlled garage. So just be on the lookout that your headliner isn't drooping. This one was literally drooping down into my head, but now I've replaced it with an Alcantara headliner. Something else here is on the doors. Over time, these handles will become loose. That's a Bowden cable that runs in the inside of the door. And that needs to be replaced. And look out for a loose driver or passenger side door handle. Something else that you'll see, not on this car, because this is a 5-speed Tiptronic transmission car, which I know there's going to be some haters out there for a Tiptronic car, but when I was in my early 20s, this is all I could really afford, and this was a great, very clean car, so I just decided to pull the trigger regardless if it's a 6-speed manual. If I was looking for one now, I'd probably be looking for a 6-speed manual, but I absolutely love this car even though it's a Tiptronic. Now, on a 6-speed manual car, you'll notice that sometimes you'll be shifting, all of a sudden the car will not shift. That's typically what we call shifter cables. Those tend to break. You'll not be able to put the car into gear, and you're kind of a sitting duck. That may need to be replaced over time. Not all the cars, of course, are going to have that issue, but over time those cables become brittle and you'll have to replace it. Now, pretty much on any 9X7, which is either 987 or 997, the 911, these temperature as well as fan speed control buttons tend to get a little bit gummy, and the black tends to come off as they start to age. Same goes for the scan knob here, as well as the volume control. Those tend to just get gummy over time. Now, something I forgot to mention when we were talking about the motor is the O2 sensors. Sometimes that will also cause a check engine light. It's a pretty easy fix, not super expensive, but just something else that may also go wrong with a 987. Now, this car is fabulous regardless of all the issues that I just talked about. I just want you to be informed about some of the things that these cars go bad with as you're looking for a 987 Cayman, as it's a pretty affordable option, as I discussed earlier. You can find these cars anywhere from high teens all the way up to mid kind of 30s. Just depends if it's a base model or if it's an S model. Again, I would highly recommend getting a pre-purchase inspection if you're in the market for a 987. But you can get a very nice S model, probably somewhere in the low to mid 30s. Now that's been inflated just a little bit because of what's happened with COVID. The prices of cars have tended to gone way up. So if I was to sell this car now, I bought this car almost 6 years ago, I would be making a pretty decent profit on this car as the value has gone up pretty significantly. So just something to keep in mind. If you're looking for a little bit more of a value Cayman S, I'd maybe wait till the market changes just a little bit and you may be able to get one for just a little bit cheaper. But as always, I really appreciate you guys watching these videos. I hope this was helpful. I know a lot of you liked that 986 video I did over a year ago, and I just wanted to shed some light here on the 987. If you guys have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. Or if you guys have any quirks that you may have found on your car, please leave it down in the comments as well, as this is a community of Porsche lovers, and I just want people to learn more about these cars and, of course, discuss them so we can continue that Porsche passion. We'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.